Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my talk, the post-lunchtime shift. So hopefully not everyone's feeling too kind of tired after a big meal or a couple of beers. I wish I'd have got a beer before this, actually. Let me introduce you to me. I'm Matt Richardson. Old childhood photographic evidence indicates that I may have had a violent and criminal past, but that's not the case. Didn't work out too well, even if I tried. I ditched the wheels and the weapons, and then during my teenage years I decided that I was going to grow my hair and become the next big thing in music, and that didn't work out either, and you'll all be really glad about that. So this is not a musical section. For the next kind of 20 or so years I grew up, I reluctantly and through no choice of my own lost that beautiful hair, and I decided I'd follow a career in technology. I've spent those years working for quite a lot of different businesses across quite a few different sectors, and during that time I've become a data leader, and I've observed quite a few things. So I want to talk to you about some of those in relation to data strategy in my rather clickbaitily titled talk, which I've just been told has had one of the longest queues for this section, so that really helped my nerves on the way in. I work for a company called Evolution Funding. I'm the head of business intelligence there. We're the largest UK's largest used auto finance platform, established in 2002, and we've had pretty successful time over the past few years. Last year in particular, we processed £1.2 billion in motor finance advances. That's around 87,000 vehicles funded. And for the past 7 years, we've been consecutively named the Car Finance Awards Best Broker. So great place to work, and only getting better. We also own two other businesses. We own a business called Click Dealer, who are a dealer management system software provider. So if you go onto a dealership website, the chances are that there's a small chance that they have a dealer management system that is managing their stock, and you're seeing vehicles that they've been able to manage through that system. We've also recently acquired another digital broker called Motion Finance, who have expanded our reach across the UK in terms of what we do. Just recently, as in the past 2 months, we've just been acquired by a global investment firm called Carlyle, and that's given us a much needed boost in terms of our plans for future growth, and also in terms of what we want to do with our usage of data. So my story, I started at Evolution Funding last year, and during that time I've been building a data strategy alongside the day-to-day operations of a busy data team, 3 of whom we've got in the team now. If you want to put your hands up, there we go. You weren't getting away without a shout out. I'm not going to talk in too much detail about our own data strategy, but what I'd rather talk you through is just some hints and tips of things that I've picked up over the past year. And if any of you guys find yourself in the same position as I was, where you've been given the keys to a data function and you're being asked to come up with a plan, hopefully there'll be something here that helps you. So what is the data strategy? We'll start with perhaps what it isn't. If anybody thinks that what the data strategy is, you're kind of wrong. It's not done at that stage. And if your bosses think that a data strategy is just about building a data platform, doing machine learning, making loads of cash, there's a part of that that's true, but there's a lot more to it than that. If you look online for references around what data strategy is, you'll find a whole load of different definitions. They all say very similar things. There's very similar keywords that appear within those. If you start to extract them, you see words like technology, process, people, goals, plans. Data is interspersed in there as well, unsurprisingly. Just to add to the mix of thousands of different data definitions, I've thrown my own up, which is a comprehensive and focused plan spanning multiple themes that outlines how an organisation will leverage data to fulfil its strategic objectives. So this is about having a plan for what you want to do with data. How are you going to help the business become data-driven? We hear about it all the time. We want data-driven businesses. This is effectively putting a plan in place so that business can become data-driven and become successful with data helping it along the way. So we'll make a proper start. You've been asked to create a data strategy. What do you do? The first thing I would tell you not to do is panic. There's a lot to do in building a data strategy. It can be quite a daunting task, but if you've been put in that situation, the thing to remember is very similar to coming to a talk like this, I suppose. People tend to want you to succeed. There's not many people who put you in that position because they want to watch you fail or die on your ass. They want you to do a good job at this, right? You were asked to do it. Go ahead and do it. You should have enough time and space to be able to build a data strategy. So people should give you the room to do this. You've got a lot to do, a lot of people to talk to, a lot of planning to make. If you're being rushed, you're not going to do it right. So that's another thing just to bear in mind. If you're put in this situation, allow yourself the time to grow into it and to get everything you need to put it into place. And to stop yourself stressing out, stay organized. Whatever file systems you use, make sure that you can find everything you need when you need to find it. Organize your emails, organize your inbox, organize anything that you're going to use to capture the information that you need when you start to build your data strategy, because that's going to help you later on down the line when you're trying to find out that conversation you had with somebody from 5 weeks ago, and there was a really interesting tidbit in there. So stay organized. Next up, you can't really build a data strategy if you're sitting in an office by yourself and not speaking to people. If you're the grumpy person at the party that's just sitting there a little bit upset, that's not going to work in terms of building a data strategy. You've got to get out in front of people. You've got to speak to them. You've got to be sociable. And you've got to be enthusiastic about it, right? You're the data leader in the business. You want to get people turned on to how to use data properly. So you need to get out amongst as many people as possible within the business, the different functions of the business, and get them excited about data as well. This is your opportunity for really good stakeholder buy-in. When you're speaking to people, you've got a couple of options. You can do one-to-one conversations, or you can do workshops. For one-to-ones, well, for all of them in fairness, be really clear on the purpose of the meetings that you're having with them. You're here to try and drag information out of them to help you in building that data strategy. Have consistent questions for everybody you speak to. Make sure you're asking the same questions so you don't have to go back again at another point because you realise you didn't ask one person something you asked somebody else. Get those questions set up in advance so that you know exactly what you want to ask them. There might be questions that come off the back of them, but have that one consistent set of questions. If you're new into a role and you're trying to find out how people are using data and you're in a data leadership position, it's really easy to get distracted by BAU. So by that I'm saying you're kind of sitting with someone and you're asking them questions about the strategy, but then they might say, hang on, while I've got you, there's a report here that's not quite doing what I want it to do. Can you help me with that, please? By all means, take those things, write them down, make notes, but don't get distracted by it. You're here to talk to that person about how to help you build that data, how they can help you build your data strategy. Make no promises. Again, when you're sitting with those people trying to find out how they use data and how they can contribute towards your strategy, they might start asking you, so you're going to build us a data platform then? When are you going to do that? Can you fix these Power BI reports that aren't working properly? At this stage, don't promise anything, because that might derail you from actually what you're trying to do at that point in time. And I'm going to come across this a few times. Write everything down. Get everything noted. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Make sure you've got that good filing system so that you know where all the outputs of those conversations were and the actions that will come from them later on. For workshops, people love coffee, sweets and biscuits. Get those heads of departments round a table and start talking to them about how they use data together as a business. The slides on the screen here are from when I used to work at Late Rooms. This was a really good conversation I had with key individuals from within the business about what they collectively liked about data, what they didn't like about data, to get them to have a bit of a scrap about maybe the differences of opinion and to throw all that information up. Again, it's just gathering information at this stage as much as possible so that you can get a view of what's making that business tick. And that's the important thing. What you're trying to do is to understand the way the business works. You want to speak the same language as everybody else in the business. If you're new to the role, understanding how the business works, so one department interacts with another, and how the data threads through the fabric of those department interactions is really, really key. Creating data flows creating kind of process maps of how departments interact with each other and what they actually do within those departments and kind of, I guess, their objectives is really, really useful at this stage. And then to try and identify where data does match up to some of those process flows. So there may be some places where there's a rich amount of data captured, some places where no data at all is captured, but they're absolutely crucial and you need something there. This is a stage where you're trying to identify where you've got the good stuff, where you've got nothing, where you've got bad stuff for that matter. In addition to this, understanding and examining the current business strategy and the goals for the business is key. So every business should have a strategy, they should have a plan for what they want to do in the next 3 to 5 years. It might be a well-structured plan, it might be a NAF plan, but they should have a plan. Understanding how each of those component parts works and how you can perhaps enable that with data is a key thing. So you're kind of making a note of all the individual parts. So for example, if you've got a business who's got a goal who said they want to increase revenue by 20%, what you might want to do at this stage is to take a note of that particular business strategy part and say, how could data help that? Because we want to do something that's enabling. Now, it's really difficult. I've used the example of using data to allow a business to make 20% more revenue. You might not have a direct route to doing that, but you might have a team who at the minute has no means of measuring how well they're performing. So if you can use data to drive that thinking with them so they can see how well they're performing, they might then start generating targets for how they work. The targets might start being met, and the business then starts to improve its own performance. And in theory, improved performance should equal an increase in revenue. So it's an indirect response, but the example I'm kind of giving is try and get to a point where you can at least have a think about how you can use data to enable each of those component parts. Turn every stone, leave no stone unturned. Look at everything that you can. Be as thorough as possible. I'll be realistic. I've been in my business for a year now. I don't know everything about it, but I found out as much as I could at the outset so I could understand how different parts of the business work with each other. There shouldn't be any unanswered questions when you get to the end of this. Don't be afraid to go back to people if you realise you've got 5 more questions, but you already asked them 50. What I would recommend is try and stack those questions together so you're not just hitting someone with Teams messages every 5 minutes, because they will get sick of that. And what you're doing here is just seeking out those hidden gems and opportunities, those little things that people perhaps haven't thought of. Look at every report that you can, every dashboard, data extracts, and try and understand the context behind them, where data flows in and out and how that makes the business kind of operate. And again, going back to what I just spoke about, how do all those things influence how the business will kind of be successful in the future? There's a lot to do there. That's weeks and weeks and weeks of work. That's talking to people, it's making notes, it's getting your head around how everything works in the business. But when you've got all this together, you're probably in a state where you can do a data maturity assessment. So a data maturity assessment is exactly as it's described. It's looking at various factors that relate to how well your business is performing in using data. There's a load of these available. There's a load of kind of free versions of them available online if you do a search. On the last slide, there's a QR code. If you follow that, there's a few links to various free data maturity assessments and some guidance for those kind of things. And usually what you'll find is there's a whole load of different measures which you'll ask yourself questions on, and they'll have a score. Usually goes from 1, which is rubbish, through to 5, which is brilliant, can't be improved. And somewhere in each of those things, you'll find yourself landing in one of those score zones. So the data maturity assessment that I've used in the past looks at things like how data's used, the tools that are used for data, leadership, how leadership is handling data, the culture within the business. And you can see I've built kind of a map of those scores, and I've got an overall score of 3 for the business in terms of where it is for its data maturity. What's really good about this is when you work through that process, you end up with a load of stuff on the back of it where you can see that perhaps you scored a 2, and it'll tell you that you could perhaps. So the good example here is one of the particular topics is basing decisions and organisational planning on data, and you can see it goes from level 1, which is people relying on gut feeling, which is probably familiar with a lot of people in the room. People have a feel for how well things are trading, for example, all the way up to using past, present and forward data to really help you drive things on. This is an example taken from the data maturity assessment for government. So there's a whole document that contains all these different topics, and if you work through that, you can basically measure each of these things on your own business yourself. One of the things worth pointing on that is I would recommend you do this first spin of this by yourself. Work through all of those things, figure out where perhaps you don't know the answers to the questions, because that's then more questions to take back to people within the business. When you've got a completely full view, you should have all the outputs of that data maturity assessment, and you should have some view of what it is you're going to do to get to level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. That becomes another part of the plan that you're going to put in place in the future. Another thing that's possibly worth doing at this stage as well is not just looking at the data maturity assessment, but your analytics maturity. So I suspect most people who work in organisations in this room will be able to tell people within the business how many of something they sold or processed or did yesterday, and maybe today. But perhaps if you saw a drop in a trend, maybe something was falling off the chart a little bit, you might not be able to say why it happened. So why are we selling less things this week than we did last week. If you can, you've moved up this curve into this diagnostic section. If you're able to talk about what might happen in the future and use your data to forecast, you're going to be in predictive. And if you can use your data to actually give some recommended actions to take, you're going to be up here in prescriptive. Most businesses I've worked in probably sit somewhere in the middle. They can tell you what happened yesterday, they can kind of tell you why there's been a change in a trend somewhere, but possibly can't tell you that much about what's happening in the future. This is a good marker to use at the beginning of your data strategy so that you can kind of benchmark yourself against this later on as you make progress. Cheeky little nod to data engineers in the room. This is where you're going to take all of the information that you've gathered, you've extracted everything from as many people as you can. You're going to try and bring it all together, get all those sound bites, get all the key points from the maturity assessment, and try and convert them into meaningful actions. And as you start to pull those actions together, you'll probably find that they kind of fall into simple themes or pillars or contexts. So for example, you might find that there's a theme around data governance or a theme around technology. I'd recommend if you do come up with different themes or different areas to focus your strategy on, you have no more than 6, otherwise it starts to get a bit messy. But those themes are something that you can then start to articulate to the business. We need to improve the data governance, we need to improve the strategy, there's a data culture need. Those themes are quite important when you start to then bring a full plan together in terms of actions and deliveries and timescales, which then gives you something that you're going to present back to the business. So I realise I've rushed through a whole load of things here, but the outcome of this should be that you have a compelling story that you can tell your exec team or the leadership, whatever you call them within your organisation. And here you can explain each of those themes, you can explain the actions required. You might need to go backwards and forwards a few times, there might be a little bit of challenge, but in general what you're seeking is agreement. And all being well, you can then start to think about, when you get agreement of the overall data strategy as a bird's eye view, you can then start thinking about what a 3 to 5 year plan looks like. What do you need to do? Why do you need to do it? How are you going to do it and when? And if you've got the resources available, you can then start asking the business for help. You know, you've got your plan, but we can't build a new technical platform without data engineers. Give us some cash, please. That kind of thing. So this is giving you that view that you can take to the leadership and help you to move that strategy onwards. Few considerations in doing this. I mentioned at the beginning, take your time. I'll reiterate it. You should have enough time to do this. You're not going to have a holiday and put your hands behind your back and have a big rest, but you should have enough time to be able to get everything that you need. When will the data thing be finished? People will ask you, never. It's never done. When you finish this strategy and you get to the end of the 5 years, you're going to have more to do. It never ends. It's just a cycle. It just keeps on going. Expect some challenge from people. Some of your stakeholders will say, we don't need this rubbish, we don't need a change, we don't need new reports, we're happy with everything we've got, or at least I am. It tells me what happened yesterday. Again, if you have that compelling story that tells people why you're doing it, that challenge shouldn't be too much to worry about. And then last of all, 3 to 5 years in data. If anyone can remember what 5 years looked like ago in data, it was very different to now. We're talking about AI much more than we ever were. If your data strategy that you're building now looks the same in 3 years, you're probably not keeping an eye on things close enough. You might be doing something wrong. That's not to say that the strategy you're building now is useless, but what I'm saying is keep an eye on trends. Be prepared to take things back to the business and say something else needs to change. We need to make an amendment to a particular part of this, or we need to take advantage of an opportunity that's coming our way to improve what we've already put together. Believe in it. This is kind of like a bit more woolly, but genuinely, if you're talking to the business about what you want to do with data, you've got to have that belief in you. People have got to believe that you believe it's going to be possible. It sounds a little bit, as I say, woolly, but genuinely, I think if there's doubts you have in yourself, or if other people have doubts in what you're telling them, then those will fester and they'll turn into rot, and something isn't going to go right somewhere. So make sure you believe and you get people to follow you in that belief. The title of this talk is how to build a successful data strategy from scratch. So how do we know it's going to be a success? Well, we're going to regularly check in against the plan. That plan that you took to the business is going to have actions in it. You're going to see where you are. You should have a plan that's set out over the next kind of 3 to 5 years. There should be milestones set in there. Your data maturity assessments that you did, revisit those. Maybe you do it every half a year once you've actually started your program and you started to deliver, just to see if anything's changing, to see if you expect the acceleration of certain areas of that to have moved at the pace you expected them to. Check in with the business goals and strategy. There might be some focal points. You might have put together something like a data quality program. So again, as you work your way through the end parts of the strategy and you put it into place, you want to see whether all the things you said you were going to do have made a difference. Stakeholder satisfaction, obviously important. All those people you spoke to right at the beginning, I'd recommend you have regular catch-ups and check-ins with them just to see that they're happy with how you're progressing. And again, it keeps that engagement going, keeps people talking about data. You might have had a plan for technology adoption. Again, it's going to be very clear to see whether that's successful because you'll be using the new thing that you've spent millions of pounds on to help you, achieve your goals. And then if you've done anything around your data strategy in relation to income generation, then again, you've got a nice easy measure there. We're starting to make money from the thing that we've put together that we said was going to make money. Last of all, one last thing. This is just a bit of a giveaway, I suppose. The 4 things on this slide, I'd be very surprised. If anyone's doing a data strategy from scratch or has been tasked with it, I'd be very surprised if those data strategies didn't cover some form of one of those 4 things. So if you've not got something related to technology, I'd be very surprised because everything seems to be based on technology around data right now. If you're putting a program in for change, the likelihood is you're going to be looking at technologies that can help enable some of that change. If your data strategy doesn't contain a nod to data governance, I suggest you go into the data governance theatre or find Nicola Askham and have a chat with her because that's key. Looking after your data as an asset, making sure you're doing all the right things with it is absolutely key. There shouldn't be a data strategy without some form of governance strategy in there. Analytics, data science, machine learning, again, shouldn't be a surprise. We're all talking about it right now. It might not be appropriate for all of us just yet, but we should definitely be looking at how we're going to use that now or in the future. And then finally, culture and skills, getting the conversation going around data, getting people within the business to understand how to use it, how to manipulate it, how to find it. There should be something of a hat tip to that in your strategy as well. I'm not saying you have to have those 4 things, but I'd be very surprised if those 4 things didn't crop up in some way when you're building this. And that's it from me. The QR code, if you follow that, takes you to a page on my website that's got a few links to data maturity assessments and a few books that I've come across as well. Follow those if you wish. And thanks for having me this afternoon. I'm pottering around for the rest of today and tomorrow, so if any of you want to chat about anything or I can help you in any way, give me a shout. Thanks very much.